Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah thumma ma ba'd. In this session, we want to talk briefly about the idea of the leadership compass, having a direction and understanding what leadership is. There are 3 points that we want to go over in brief. The first being hitting the reset button. And what that entails is the need for the Muslim community to renew its understanding of leadership and to refreshen its understanding of leadership in a way that will allow it to comprehend what is effective leadership in the 21st century. The second point follows the first in that it is a call for developing historical consciousness, to look back in hindsight at history, to look back at history, to take a hindsight view and to come to try to understand how it is that leadership has been conceptualized and practiced throughout Islamic history, and what are failed models and what are models of success. The third point, which flows out of the first initiative, which is hitting the reset button, is reframing our concept of leadership so that it is in sync with the prophetic legacy. And here we said reframing leadership in light of the prophetic model or light of prophetic example. Now, there are 3 graphs here that are worthy of contemplating in order to understand this concept of the leadership compass. The Muslim community for far too long has centered its idea of leadership from historical realities, from its historical understanding of how leadership has been practiced. And oftentimes, that conception of leadership has been very limited. So, our basis here then for leadership is just what we inherited historically, what we have seen practice in the community, what we've seen leaders exhibit in the community. What we want to do is shift our center, our source of understanding for leadership to the Sunnah, to the example of the Prophet Muhammad, as a beginning stage of reframing our conception of leadership. Historical realities dictate to us that throughout the history of the Muslim community, there have been examples of leadership which have not fallen in line with the prophetic example, which have not been exemplary, which have not been demonstrative of the practice of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. So first, in order for us to be able to understand leadership, we need to understand what has unfolded historically within this community of believers and how leadership has been conceptualized and then compared to what the Prophet Muhammad exhibited and exemplified as a paragon. Paragon meaning a model that is perfect to be followed. The highest point in this leadership compass concept that we want to get to is to base our understanding of leadership on the Quran and the Sunnah, to look at the Quran and see what types and modes and practices of leadership are there in the Quran, in the life or in the lives of the prophets, and in particular in the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in his companions, and the historical experience that we have as a community in terms of what is good leadership, what is bad leadership. We want to use this reality, this experience, in light of the Quran and the Sunnah to develop a new concept of leadership which will allow us to function in the contemporary world. So that will take from us then to center ourselves on the study of the biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and look historically, look back in hindsight to see how leadership has been practiced and to see if the example of the Prophet Muhammad fits or doesn't fit. We don't want to keep regurgitating this idea that leaders are to be respected regardless. No, leadership is something which should follow and exhibit the characteristics of what we learned in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. But the highest point would be to move from just a study of the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad to a study of Quran, to a study of the Sunnah, to a study of history overall, not just the history of the Muslim community, and to see how the Quran and the Sunnah looks at these various models of leadership that we find throughout history in human experience, and then to reformulate our conception of leadership. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين.